Well, good morning, everybody. We are almost ready to start the Good Leadership Breakfast, but if you've been here before, you know we have a little bit of prep work to do, and that is to get ready for our polling. So as you're getting your breakfast, if you're in line, don't worry, this will come up again later on in the breakfast. But if you're already down at your table, feel free to bring out your phone, and you can take a picture of the QR code, or you can also find it within your program today, or you can go to www.slido.com and type in the number for our polling today. And when you do, go ahead and take our test poll. Question is, how do you take your coffee? Go ahead and take the next minute here to go ahead and get your polling set up, and then we'll get started with the breakfast. Benny, do you want to do some how do you take your coffee music as they go ahead and get their poll set up? We have over 50 of you who've already gotten set up for the polls today. That's a pretty good start. This slide will come up again later, so if you haven't gotten set up to be a part of our polling today, you'll be able to in a little bit. As we get ready for the Good Leadership Breakfast this morning, I'd love to share a video first from our presenting sponsor, Old National Bank. Everybody, please bring your attention to the screens.
The sooner I get old, the faster I can get a construction loan to double my space, and that means a brighter future.
Getting old means we got the financing to go from micro to macro.
As a doctor, I recommend getting old. That's how I expanded my operations. Just a little medical humor.
Introducing Old National Bank, where relationships and results matter.
You're never too old to get old. Lights off.
Old National Bank.
We are so grateful for our presenting sponsor, Old National Bank. I'd like to welcome Shally Alamar, CEO of Wealth Management at Old National Bank, to go ahead and provide a little good morning message here. Shady.
Thank you. Wow, people are so busy out there talking. It's such an energy, a lot of vibe this morning, right? Can we all feel the vibe?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else this morning other than here. The weather is nice. Hopefully some of you can go golfing this afternoon. I'm looking at you, Andy. But it's great to be here together. I just got reminded walking through the room that we just spent a couple of years underground with COVID, so it's good to be here. It's good to be with this event, obviously with Good Leadership Breakfast. At Old National, you've probably seen our advertisement billboards more often the past couple of years, and there will be more. So we're here to stay. We have about 350 people in this market. It's an important market for us. And banking is very important right now, with the rates where they are, with the market where it is. Make sure you connect with one of our team members who do what's right for the client. And we're here to serve the community. So thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Shady. And with that, everybody, look around the table, look around the room, and wish someone good morning as we go ahead and start the 103rd Good Leadership Breakfast. There's the buzz. Hey, hey. So you're going to get a lot of time today, everybody, to go ahead and connect with the people at the table, to connect with the people in the room. The Good Leadership Breakfast, the 103rd time that we've come together to go ahead and do exactly this. My name's JC. I'll be your co-host today. So as you enjoy your breakfast, I want to quickly, for people who maybe haven't been here before, give a little landscape of what will happen this morning. So, polling. We do a lot of research on what goodness looks like within the workplace and within the world to really show with data that goodness pays. So we'll be doing some polling today. A couple bits of intellectual and emotional opportunities to connect with who you are and where you are in goodness. 7F's wheel. You'll get to move through that exercise. The bucket of goodwill. You'll get to go ahead and take the energy in this room and put it out in the world. And then we'll get to go ahead and hear Paul and Glenn have a conversation about where goodness shows up within the workplace and in the world. And then Kevin will go ahead and take some time to talk about the cornerstones of goodness as you engage in a workshop. All these things will wrap up within the energy of this room this morning. Because as the Good Leadership Breakfast has continued to grow and find its place in this world, it has become a dynamic force of good leaders who are improving the way that organizations operate because they know that goodness pays. That is becoming less and less an odd idea within the workplace because of what you are doing right here. So with that being said, I'd love to welcome to the stage Kevin Sensenig, President of Good Leadership. Good morning, Kevin. Good morning. Good to see you. Give him a round of applause, y'all. Hey.
Thank you. Well, thank you, JC. I appreciate that. Wonderful to be back with you again. Always look forward to our time together at the Good Leadership Breakfast. We've certainly had a wonderful time so far this spring in our series about winning with a goodness culture. We've heard some wonderful things from our speakers. We'll hear more things today from Glenn. It's really been good to get some of your input and your ideas around this concept as well. At Good Leadership, we are building an organizational effectiveness firm, hoping our teams to really thrive and win together around this concept that goodness pays. And we find our clients are thriving because they're using our coaching processes to build that team, leadership, and organizational alignment, and then those development programs to spread that goodness and expand that leadership capacity throughout organizations. It's really a powerful way of having that winning culture come alive and be part of what we're doing. So, also I want to mention that we believe in this idea of goodness not just as an idea and concept, but really as something critical within organizations. And if you've not had a chance or you're interested, Paul Hillen and Paul Botts wrote the book, How Goodness Pays, based on 3 years of research around what goodness looks like in organizations, how it comes alive, and how we can utilize it within our culture. And so if you're here today and do not have a copy of this book and would like to have a copy, please send an email to info@goodleadership.com. Give us your name, your mailing address, and request the book, and we'll be happy to send you a free copy so you can begin to take that journey with us and building that goodness within your culture. So as I mentioned to JC, it's been really good the last 2 breakfasts to really begin to build the conversation on winning with a goodness culture, and we asked some key questions of you in the last 2 breakfasts. The first one we asked was, does the culture in your company help you win in the market? And a resounding number of you, almost 88% said, yes, it does. What wonderful things to think about, that culture is not just an internal concept, it has a very powerful outside-in perspective for our organization. It's good to see that we embrace and believe that. We also ask you a second question. We believe that goodness increases accountability, and accountability is a key part of that winning culture. And so we ask you then, to what degree do employees in your organization seek accountability? We want people seeking accountability, not just being held accountable. Interestingly enough, about 50% of you said, most of our people are doing that, but not all of them. So I think some opportunity for us to strengthen that seeking accountability mindset within our culture. So today we want to kind of think about that a little bit more deeply. Think about how important are we making the concept of culture and seeking accountability within our organization. And so we're going to do a couple of new polls today to kind of build on this concept. So our first poll today, JC, let's go ahead and get some input from our audience on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've already entered the polling system today, you're already set. This question should be popping up. In your culture, how important is it that employees seek accountability? If you didn't get a chance to go ahead and set up polling yet, you can flash your camera at the QR code on the screen or type in slido.com and enter this number. And as Benny and the trio provide a little bit of music, let's watch more and more of these numbers come on in. So Kevin, what are you seeing here?
All right, very interesting. So we said already we believe culture is valuable from an outside-in perspective. People are not seeking enough accountability, but yet it's very important in our culture. So it's interesting that we believe it's important people are seeking accountability, but yet they're not stepping up to that. So how do we begin to change that conversation, change that tone as leaders and employees in organizations to build that energy for seeking accountability? So let's go to our second poll question, kind of build on that idea a little bit.
Awesome, you guys are getting good at this. Here's your question. Perhaps, there it is.
There it is.
Who has the biggest impact on the degree to which employees seek accountability? Who has the biggest impact on the degree to which employees seek accountability? Benny, a little thinking music.
All right, well, thank you for that input. And it looks like, resoundingly, we say our direct managers have a huge impact on how we think about seeking accountability. So we go back, let's put it into context. Culture is important to our outside perspective and how we deal with our clients and our customers. We want people seeking accountability. Only about half are doing that. It's important in our culture, and we're looking to our direct managers in our organization to drive that sense of connection and build that sense of seeking accountability. Interesting perspectives as we get started today. I'm going to come back a little bit later on. We're going to do a workshop together on how we can begin to energize managers around that and build that sense of seeking accountability within winning in a goodness culture. So,
awesome.
Thanks,
Kevin. We'll see you in a little bit.
Yep.
So as we move on, everybody, as I mentioned, we do a couple of things at every single breakfast. If you've been here, you know them. If this is your first time, if you come back, you'll do them again on purpose. When we repeat little acts, where we start to see where we are headed. I'd like to invite one of my favorite humans to the stage right now, Darren Lynch, President and CEO of Irish Titan. And he's not only one of my favorite humans because he gave me this wonderful shirt, but because he really understands how goodness plays in the workplace. So Darren Lynch and Irish Titan are the sponsors of the 7Fs Wheel. So Darren, why don't you share a little bit about why the 7Fs Wheel is so important at Irish Titan?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to yet another Good Leadership Breakfast. I think that for those of you who are fortunate enough to not know me, I know many of you in the audience, to my fortune, to your misfortune. I'm Darren Lynch, founder and CEO of Irish Titan. We're an e-commerce agency, so we build and grow e-commerce channels. That means, for example, the Minnesota Wild, our client, we build their e-commerce site and work with them on their e-commerce digital marketing. That's what Irish Titan does. So many sponsors, when they get to the stage at this wonderful breakfast, talk about how goodness pays and talk about the concept of how teams thrive in a culture of encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork. I made sure to write it down so I had the right terminology, right? Yeah, exactly, right? I'm going to take a different tact because I think the reason that I have been a proud supporter, sponsor of Good Leadership Breakfast from nearly the beginning is one that I think is a little more visceral. As I mentioned, I know many people here, so I know many of you come to this breakfast. How many leave this breakfast feeling better? Right? Right. So that is why I sponsor and we sponsor the Good Leadership Breakfast. The 7 wheels concept matters, but when I leave, I hope that not just the day that I leave, but the day, weeks, etc., between breakfast and after breakfast, I'm a better leader. And I'm hoping that Irish Titan feels that and that we're a better company because of that. So I think that's why we're all here and we're proud to sponsor Good Leadership Breakfast. So thank you to Paul, Melinda, Kevin, Aaron, the whole Good Leadership team, and let's look forward to another breakfast.
Thanks, Darren. Let's give him a round of applause, y'all. So let's jump in. On page 2 of your program today, you will see the 7Fs wheel, or in the handout, you'll see it, but you can also then pull it up online with the QR code on page 2. The 7Fs: faith, family, finances, fitness, friends, fun, and future. Take time right now to consider how you are doing in each of these areas of your life, in work and at home. 1 being, I could not be any worse within this area of my life. 10 being, I could not be any better. And then we'll talk about this exercise after you get some time to think about it personally. So Benny, some 7Fs music. Go ahead and either with a pen on the table or using the QR code online, go ahead and circle your 7F scores right now. So now take a moment, if you haven't already, to connect your 7 dots, and then look at your wheel. Is it small? Is it large? Would it roll? Is there a jagged edge? You may go, it's like, okay, I get it. Like I'm taking a moment to zoom in, to zone in on where I am and how I am. But I also challenge you, maybe open up your phone right now and make a little reminder to do this exercise again 7 days from now, a month from now. So you can start to see how things change. Because at Good Leadership, we firmly believe that everyone can grow on their 7Fs wheel as much at work as they can at home. When we look at the teams that we work with, how are the people on those teams impacting each of these areas within your life? And if they're not, consider how you are impacting theirs. Because all of a sudden, that's where we start to see that goodness pays in small ways personally, but in big ways when we come together. So keep this exercise and bring it back again and again each time you come to Good Leadership Breakfast, but also anytime you need a little moment to go, where am I and how am I doing? Next, a little exercise. The bucket of goodwill. So at the hardware store, this may be the handy paint pail. At the Good Leadership Breakfast, it is the bucket of goodwill. Right? This is an opportunity for you to go, the goodness that I feel, the goodness that I experience in my life, the good blessings and opportunities that I have, how do I pay that forward? So over the last 103 breakfasts, over $400,000 has been given away. Mark Bergman, early on in the breakfast, said, hey, how can we take the energy here and pay it forward? And this was born. So right now I want you to consider the blessings in your life, how you're doing, and monetize that by putting some dollars in the bucket. You can write a check, you can write an IOU, you can go ahead and take a little scan of the QR code and donate online. And then step 2, throw your business card into the handy paint pail as well. If you don't have a business card, you'll see there's some cards on the table that you can write your information down. Because what's going to happen on later in the breakfast, Glenn's going to draw a lucky winner, and you're going to be able to go ahead, one person, to donate the money collected here today to a charity of your choice. And yes, Mark and Handy Paint Pail will double that money to go ahead and exponentially grow the goodness that's leaving this room today. So right now, throw some money in the bucket, throw your business card in the bucket, and engage in a couple minutes of conversation tying the 7 F's into this bucket of goodwill. A little conversation topic on the screen. Which of the 7 F's is most closely tied to accountability at work? Benny, some giving lots of money music, please. All right, know you have a little bit more time to complete making your donation and putting your business card in the bucket. But like I said, connect in your minds the 7 F's wheel to the bucket of goodwill. It may be easy to go, okay, the number on my finances is where our giving comes from. But we like to say that it's connected more to your future than your finances. Right? The way that you look at your future greatly impacts the way that you put goodness into the world and the way that you see that you can impact others. So, this breakfast wouldn't happen with the goodness of the organizations and the businesses that help this happen. Old National Bank, our presenting sponsor, Irish Titan, sponsor the 7 F's wheel. Then we have all of these other sponsors who really make this come to life. So we'd like to have Jen Meister, President, Park Nicollet Methodist Hospital and Health Partners Home and Community Services, come up to give one more message from our sponsors today. Jen.
Yeah. Good morning. Happy to be here. It's a great group, and I always get a lot of energy from this group and having the table discussions. So Health Partners, we are an integrated care delivery organization, so we provide your care, your coverage. We do research, we dental, a variety of other services that we bring together to support you. We're really your partner for good. And so there you go. There's the connection to the Good Leadership Breakfast. We really have a culture that we say is head and heart together culture. So the best of science and medicine combined with the compassion of the heart and the goodness that comes. So we work a lot with good leadership, with our leadership development, bringing teams together, do individual coaching, and find just a great synergy with our culture at Health Partners. Also, just this breakfast, you will leave, I guarantee you will leave with a lot of energy today, and that's one of my favorite things about coming today. And then lastly, I'll say I went to college with Glenn, so if you want any freshman year stories, come see me afterwards, so I can tell you a few. Good. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Jen. All right, and thanks to all of our sponsors this morning. Well, it's time for me to hand it on over. There we go. To the creator of the Good Leadership Breakfast. Right, an informed optimist, a contrarian who pushes back against the bad news bias in the media, and a thought leader on organizational effectiveness. Please welcome Paul Botts to the stage, founder and CEO of Good Leadership. Hey, Paul.
Thanks, JC.
Nice shoes, Paul.
Yeah, you know what? Where else could I wear this jacket? I officially declare 9:15 this morning summer, so there. Yeah, thank you so much. This particular series has been really powerful for all of us because it's as if we've really moved past everything that happened over the last 3 years. We're so grateful to see the room full. It was awesome to have the parking lot full early this morning. So thank you very much. It's really important that we get that sense of normalcy back. The theme this spring has been winning with a goodness culture. And we heard some wonderful things in March from Amanda Brinkman, who's sort of a celebrity in business in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, former chief marketing executive at Deluxe Corporation, now turned entrepreneur, has this business called Sunshine Studios. And she was just beaming with energy for this idea that you can do well by doing good. Very similar to what we just heard from Jen. And then in April last month, Christine Geisler, Christine has a very powerful story, both personally and professionally, built on crisis in many ways. And she was talking about the ability to find gratitude in every single moment. And if you were in the room, she just radiated this energy that was just impossible to miss. And so here we are today. We're going to hear from Glen Gunderson. And Glen is known by so many people in this room for doing wonderful work in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And after the breakfast last month, I got an email in my inbox from an executive who is in our client base saying, hey, I'm curious about something. What's your fascination with winning? And I've been asked a lot of questions in my life, but that's the first time I've ever been asked that one. And I thought a lot of it before I replied because we know there's a lot of ways for organizations to thrive. At Good Leadership, we have a really simple and strong point of view. And part of it revolves around this idea. Every organization has a credible threat. And sometimes when we talk to clients the first time, the executive team cannot identify what that is. We believe every organism, every organization has a credible threat. If nothing else, it has the people that we serve have threats. And so that's the source of our fascination with winning. But even more than that, we believe that question begs two simple questions. Remember, this was a chief executive client of ours. And so we think we need to talk about what's the role of C-suite leaders underneath that question. So I believe C-suite leaders need to make the moves in the market, the competitive moves, so that the organization can thrive. That's the most powerful thing they do. And also build a belief system that the direction we're going and the culture we've chosen and the strategy we have, a belief system that it's the right thing to do. And there's nothing that proves a belief system like knowing you're winning, especially when it's an outside-in scorecard. Sometimes we use internal scorecards, and that doesn't feel as good as to know for sure that the people we're serving, we're doing it well, that more and more people want it, and that we're hitting our financial numbers, our board and our owners are happy. Those are outside-in measures, and it really feels good to be winning. But even this person I was debating with still was not convinced. And the email came back and it said, yeah, but you don't understand our culture. Our job is to serve. I said, okay, I can give you that one. And yet, in other ways, I like to think about the law of opposites. So what's the opposite of feeling like you're winning? Okay, so if you go 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row where you're feeling like you are, how does that make you feel? And then how can you retain the best and brightest people who are really putting your organization on the map and compelling it forward if we're not finding a way of feeling like we're winning on a regular basis? And so I'm not here to say that we got to set up this competitive energy like this. But what we can tell you, when we help organizations really turn the corner and start to transform, everybody in the organization will say, we're feeling like we're winning. That's my fascination with winning. In addition to that, we have to ask, what really is culture then? Because this whole thing is about winning with the goodness culture, and specifically, what is a goodness culture? The research we've done in this book here talks about goodness as when people thrive together in a culture of encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork. So those words, positivity, encouragement, are really important to culture. But when we think about how culture gets formed, we believe that a good culture is at the base of an effective organization, and you can't have an effective organization without good leadership, and you can't have good leadership without goodness. So good leadership is the art and science of working together. Here's that plural concept again, and it's easier to work together when you feel like you're winning. And goodness, we just talked about as being the baseline of it is being thriving together. Here's something that I think is really an interesting discussion, and if you want to have it at your table later, or if you want to talk about this back at the office, when we start talking about culture, this is the model that we use. I think it's the simplest thing ever. We believe culture is the sum total of what gets rewarded and stopped in an organization. And if you really want to say it, you go down to the bottom, it's what gets rewarded and punished. And so when we first meet leaders in organizations, they will tell us about their culture. And then when we get down in the organization, we start to really do the work, they'll tell us about the culture. And if you're wondering about what that is in your organization, we could have a couple of executive coaches interview 2 and 3 layers down from the top, and they will absolutely tell us what gets rewarded and what gets punished. And that's how we figure out what happens in a culture. How does that culture help people feel like they're winning or not? And that really starts the transformational process. So that's why we chose the subject, winning with the goodness culture. We're getting 3 different perspectives: corporate marketing executive turned entrepreneur, global chief human resources officer, and now Glen Gunderson from the YMCA of the North here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And what I think has been fascinating about watching how we've chosen speakers over the last 13 years, it kind of mirrors what we've been seeing when we look at organizational strategy. And that is the cultures that are surviving and thriving the most have made a shift away from the command and control chain of command kind of hierarchical structure to a culture of teams. People who have learned how to stay aligned together. It's easier when you're focused externally. Then also, how to become self-correcting if something's not going well in the team. But most importantly, people that come to work with a thrive together mentality. That's what we're trying to do here, is to build a thrive together mentality into the day-to-day operations of every single leader we meet, especially you. So this is why we think Glen Gunderson is such a good speaker for today. If you don't know Glen, here's 2 slides that'll give you a really big overview here. So professionally, he's been involved in the athletics and sports business at Bally and Lifetime. Then he made a career transition to healthcare. Everyone noticed how good he was at each step of this way. And then he was asked to become the CEO of one of really prestigious organizations, the YMCA here in the Twin Cities. And in his learning there, he's really discovered how to have a relationship with the racial concept that we're dealing with in our society. Fantastic podcast about conversations on race. Personally, like many of our speakers, he grew up in a small town. We're going to ask him about his fascination with horses and racing. He has a love of basketball, music, theater, adventure, travel, all these things that I think are awesome as well. And he's an engaged dad and a wonderful family man, and I just cannot wait one more second. Please join me in welcoming Glen Gunderson. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Absolutely.
me. Appreciate it.
Have a seat.
I'm glad it's not called the average leadership breakfast.
Yeah. There'd be way too many people here then when
yes.
I gave Glen permission to take his tie off today. Yeah, so make yourself comfortable. Okay.
Hold it up over there.
So what I would like to know about first is when you hear the words winning with a goodness culture, what does that mean to you in the context of your big job?
Well, thank you. First of all, it's really awesome to be here. There's so many people that I've had a chance to run across that I haven't seen in a while, and keep those stories down, Jen. And I've got two of my favorite people in the world out there, my daughter and my wife. Had a chance to come today, so daughter back from college. You know, the Y has given me this amazing opportunity to make goodness kind of a daily job, a daily part of the job. If you think about where we are in culture and in community right now, we've got a lot of work to do to bring people together. We don't have a place where we convene like we may have in slower and simpler times. We don't seem to be able to do anything but politicize most everything. And I think media has created such extremes. And so as I think about the Y, we have this amazing ability to actually be the place where people come together and that we serve in a very dynamic way for those that need us most, and then ultimately helping to move community forward in a goodness way, in a positive way. So for me, I'm really blessed, super fortunate to be able to work in a context like the YMCA, where day in and day out, we are geared, wired, just committed to trying to move people forward in a positive, goodness sort of way.
Yeah, that momentum is a key concept of what we talk about. So over the last 10 days, I got so many messages from people saying, oh my God, I know Glen Gunderson. I've been on his board. I engaged in this way. And many people described being a part of your board as being sort of a pivotal moment for them. And so that's a wonderful transition to where I love to go with these interviews. And that is, when you look back at your career, what were some of those pivot points? And we think about a pivot point as when you sort of collide with something and it sends you in a different direction. And you look back on it later and say, wow, that was important for me. So can you describe 2 or 3 of those pivot points for you?
Sure, yeah. And many of you know the Lifetime Fitness brand, and I worked there for about 14 years. And worked for, and I don't know if there are any Lifetime folks out here, amazing place, very strong-willed, mercurial founder who I was working for, and really found my way to being kind of pigeonholed, where the leader was looking for me to become more of a creative director in a marketing context, leading the marketing function of the organization at kind of this very hyper growth period. And my desire was to try to become a better business person. I really wanted to grow, Paul, as someone who could serve effectively and raise up or grow a business. And so I kept feeling this tension of being pushed back into, what was the font package in the direct mail piece versus how might we, think about transforming the brand. And so came to an inflection point that was probably more like hitting your head against a brick wall. And just basically, finally, maybe in that particular context, stood my ground to say, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not interested in just becoming a creative. I want to become a better business leader. And so that actually, where I thought I was going to be fired, maybe 3 or 4 times in that conversation, it led to a complete transformation of my career opportunity there, going from, being pigeonholed, but kind of carving myself out of that box to serve in the way that allowed me to build businesses within the business. So more of a business development role versus the marketing role that I was in. And it was transformational. It allowed me to see startups within a startup time and time again and learn and fail and learn and fail.
Well, then tell us about how you learned about and ended up in the CEO role at the Y.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was with an early stage health technology company, loved my work there. A couple of dear friends, at least 2 or 3 out in the audience today that overlapped with me there. And it looked like that company was going to be sold. And if we were sold, may have to move or relocate with young kids wasn't the idea of a good time. So we were going to try to stay in this community. I got a call from the search firm. I'd been actually praying about what might be next for me and kind of thinking of it through both a faith and family lens. And I was, not quite smart enough to realize that a week later I got a call from the search firm that was leading the search for the Y. The YMCA of Minneapolis, the YMCA of St. Paul were merging, coming together to form one agency. And I got a call to say, hey, would you be interested in this search? And I said no. And I said no on the basis of the narrow little slice of understanding I had of the Y. I didn't understand the Y's social mission, its outreach capability, the impact it had on community, so turned it down. A week later, I got a call from my mentor, one of my mentors, who said, you knucklehead, what are you thinking? Like, what are you doing? This is you, this is your community, this is serving, this is reaching out to make a big impact. And so in that kind of mentor pressure, I kind of dug into the opportunity and then saw it as something that could be really special. But I wasn't quite there. We were on spring break, and I'm going to throw my daughter under the bus here for making it happen. We were on spring break. I knew I was going to get the job offer while we were on break, and so I thought, oh, dad-daughter teaching moment. This will be great. I'll explain that, hey, here's the job I'm in, and here's the job opportunity I have. So I brought Sophia into a room, and I opened the FedEx package and looked at the offer, and I said, hey, here's, you know what I do, sort of as an 8-year-old or 9-year-old, whatever you might know. I'm sure she was really, really making a lot of sense of this. And then I said, and here's what I might do at the Y. I said, what do you think I should do? And she said, Dad, I think you should go to the Y. You'll help more people at the Y. And so I give Sophia a lot of credit for being in this job.
Okay, that's enough. Sophia, you want to come up here? I want to talk to you. Right? Yeah.
She's actually the smarter one. So
yeah. Well, you said it. I didn't. Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know if you recognize what it's like to sit next to this jacket. These are transitional. So are they getting darker? Are they?
Yeah.
And luckily the table is blocking the shoes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There's
absolutely. Well, my clothier King Bavender, he's out here. He can hook you up with one of those.
I know.
Yeah.
He hooked me up in knickers for a golf thing a few times.
Yeah, that's right.
He came right over when he saw my Macy's blazer. He's ready to fix me up.
Yeah, that's right. So let's go back to the Y, because the Y is one thing, but this is Minneapolis-St. Paul. There's this thing called the river, and it goes between the two, and it like separates it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of leaders have died on the coral reef of that river, trying to put things together. Right? Okay, so you succeeded.
Yeah.
That's the good part. So what did you encounter? You're brand new into an industry you didn't really understand.
Right.
You're putting St. Paul and Minneapolis together. So talk us through that. How did that work?
Yeah, by the way, it took you 13 years to get me up here, so I thought maybe everybody that had come up here twice had already been up.
It was hard for me to get over the St. Olaf thing.
Yeah, I know. Mm-hmm. Guess I don't do interviews with Gusties very well, but it's... repeat your question.
Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Oh yeah, Minneapolis and St. Paul, those small things. You're right, the river is such a cultural divide, amazing. So when I first came on, the Minneapolis Y had the likes of the Richard Davises, David Wickman on the board. So really had been focused around developing CEO-type board members that really understood governance, understood how to build culture, but also how to stay out of the way. They really understood the dividing line between management and governance. And the St. Paul Y was really more, it was a terrific board, but it was more directors in companies, managers in companies that were really more likely to kind of support the management of the organization. So you had the cultural divide of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and the distinct pride there, but then you had very distinct board constructs that you had to mash together and try to see how they might come together. And for those of you that serve boards, when I first started, I had 75 members on this board. So there were, 36 on one side and 37 the other, whatever the math was. And Richard Davis, actually, who many of you would know, who's a dear mentor, an incredible servant leader, goodness leader. I said, how do I deal with this? How do I put these two things together? He said, well, you got to seat the board. Every time they get together, you got to seat them, and you got to put half Minneapolis and half St. Paul at every table, and you'll watch relationships start to form. So that was one piece of it, was trying to pull the board together so that they started to see, and then also help half of that board back up and become governors versus managers. But the essence of the Y is so strong, the realities of how you might impact community by virtue of serving on that board, that eventually folks came along. We did manage the board down size-wise to a degree, which was helpful. And ultimately, started to recognize that the needs of the community, despite the distinctions in the pride of ownership of St. Paul, Minneapolis, are very, very similar, right? The families in need have similar needs. We all care about the same things. We all want a great education, food, shelter, those things for our families and our kids. And those common needs and community were what brought the board together.
I want to ask a little bit more about sort of how this evolved. Once you stabilized the organization, you got people focused on what a healthy community of Minneapolis-St. Paul looks like, and then you got onto this, conversation about race. Started the podcast, right? Yeah. So talk to us about that. How did you get there, and then what are you really learning being the host of that?
Yeah. Well, 2020 was a major inflection for all of us, right? And it was in particular a challenge for the Y. When the governor kind of started to shut things down, when the pandemic shut things down, it changed our entire operation, right? We were operating buildings, we were operating child care centers, we were operating camps. All of that came to a screeching halt. Shortly thereafter, of course, we have George Floyd's murder, and the racial and social unrest became very real. And even an organization like the Y and our leadership team were really called out to say, what are we doing? What are we doing about equity? How are we engaging from a DE&I perspective? And we had been doing a lot. We had launched an equity innovation concept. Dr. Hetty Walls back here, the idea engine and juice behind that idea has just done an amazing job. We went through the murder, the unrest. It was a particularly tragic summer for us as a family. It was just overwhelming. And we were also going after having to right-size the organization to survive. So we had to go through a tremendous volume of layoffs of people that were such good and faithful servants of the Y. So exceedingly painful. But one of the things that was called out was, look, you're the Y, you're serving all. Why are you not even more vocal, more visible around equity and leadership? And so I had a couple of mentors that I asked. I said, what do you think about me being more vocal and sustaining that voice for change around our race and social issues? And so it has been profound. Interviewing the likes of Tony Dungy, Alex Rodriguez, Kevin Warren, on and on, leaders of color in most cases, who are telling their very raw stories about where they've come from and what it has taken for them to overcome certain barriers. And just eye-opening for me, a little small-town, middle-aged white dude, if you couldn't tell, that is reconciling my own opportunities and privilege and really not understanding the way I would like to what the realities are for some in our community. And I think all of us, I look out over this audience, and this audience could become more diverse. And this audience could become richer in that diversity relative to learning from one another. And I've been blessed by it. I believe the organization has, and I think it's teaching us that we've really got to move from the politicization of everything to a humanitarian approach and just loving up on humans.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that. Somebody has to lead the way, and I think I know most of the people in this room where our hearts are willing. Yeah. It's always not easy to see the pathway. And so where can we find the podcast?
On any conversations on race, and we're doing conversations on leadership. So on any of the podcast platforms, you can find it.
Awesome. Let's shift now to something that's more in line, or directly aligned with what we're doing at Good Leadership. This idea that good leadership is a plural concept. It's about getting people to work together, to do things we couldn't do by ourselves. And so we asked you to think about success habits that you've learned from different people along the way. Yeah. You mentioned 3, and the first one, I'm going to put a slide up here for a second. The first one says, take cues from the front lines. Yeah. So as a CEO, you're helping your team work together better. How is this a success habit? Why, and how do you do it?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that the instincts that you can gain, the perspective you can gain from the frontline team members is insanely valuable. So if you really want to know the authentic relationship with your customer, you have to spend time with your frontline team members. In the banking environment, it might be that individual right at the teller desk, right? They know where your product fails, they know where it works, they know where your systems are problematic, they know where the inefficiencies are. And I think sometimes we discount that a young person maybe, and we employ a ton of young people. And in fact, I think about this a lot. We're now employing 5 generations of leaders. We now have our alpha generation becoming our counselors in training and our leaders in training for our camp infrastructure. So think about that, 5 distinct kind of styles of listening, learning, leading. And so there's so much to be gained from that perspective. I tend to believe that the greatest ingenuity, the most novel ideas are coming from right next to your customer. And historically, in corporate culture, we just think hierarchically all the time, right? We think about the C-suite on down, we think about top-down hierarchy, and I think that's beginning to change. I think in a goodness culture, you at the very least need to flip that hierarchy. You need to think about, and I think even putting it on paper, that you as leaders are on the bottom and that your customers on the top and your frontline team members are way more important than they've ever been, especially these younger generations. And so how do you tap into what they are seeing every day? I think that's a particularly important success habit. And and it's interesting, I have a couple of my venerable team members back here, and it's dangerous too, because sometimes you're guilty, you kind of become guilty of grabbing the study of one. And I've worked for leaders like this, and some of you have probably tried to curb these habits. You're out on a weekend and you run into a team member somewhere in your organization, and they vent about something, and then you show up on Monday and you're trying to retool based on that study of one. That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
But taking that study of one and then finding out if there are patterns, I think, is critically important. So I encourage us as leaders going out and spending time in the shoes of those leaders, of those team members, and ultimately really trying to develop an intimacy in what it is they're up to, what they're doing, and it lends for us to a bit of a culture of belonging, that folks feel like they're connected to the bigger picture by virtue of kind of flattening that curve on the hierarchy sense. And the other thing I'd say is I think the next wave of org structures has to become more fishnet-like. It doesn't even look like it used to look top-down or bottoms-up. I think we need to have such a circuitry now of how decisions flow, how information flows, for us to be effective, especially with these different learning styles that we're employing.
Yeah, that's what we call teams of teams.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
So second, find your unique decompression chamber and use it.
Yeah.
So this is the first time I've heard this one, so I'm really interested in what you're thinking.
Yeah, so this I think about on an individual basis, but also on a team basis. So for me, I think about the burdens of leadership to a degree, and especially in a nonprofit context, in a context like the Y, you're taking on the burdens. Yeah. You're taking on the trauma of community, and it can be overwhelming. It's almost pastoral, right? I'm attending funerals of our donors. I'm engaged with volunteers on our board, so when are they going to meet? They're going to meet especially early or especially late. And so the day extends, it becomes, challenging to balance, and of course all the things that we're dealing with in community. So I think about each of you has to find a decompression chamber. And for me, my family will laugh at this, but for me it's digging in the dirt. Like I had to make sure my hands were presentable today, because when I get away from the office, I just love digging in the dirt, whether that's fixing something, cutting down a dead tree, fixing a fence. We live in the country, so I love the idea of just getting away from it and getting to the essence of the earth and nature and being outdoors. And so I find a lot of decompression happens. In fact, my wife and daughter are both smiling because I've got my farm shirt. So when they see me come down with the farm shirt that's got a few holes in it and maybe a little grease and a little dirt, okay, Dad's going to go decompress. So I really encourage leaders, you've got to find your decompression chamber. For me, it's that, and it's exercise. I got to move in some way, shape, or form every day. I feel like if I've got a pattern of a few days in a row where that's not happening, it starts to mount, and the stress can really take hold. And I think teams have to find this too, and that's really in building a trusting and safe place for community and for connection and for being real and being authentic with one another. But I challenge everybody, if you don't have it, eventually it'll catch up with you. And so when you see me around town, you may see some dirt under the fingernails.
Yeah, I'm going to ask to see pictures of that shirt.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's about ready to be thrown away.
It's about ready. Well, yeah. So you say ask why not a lot.
Yeah.
So why is that important to you, and how do you do it?
Yeah. I think we're really good at asking why. And when I think about senior leadership kind of models, you see a lot of Business Journal articles, a lot written over the last number of decades around you got to ask why and why and why to really understand the full ecosystem of what it is you're leading. And I've really tried to flip that. I really think why not's more important. And here's what I mean by that. I think when you're asked why once, twice, 3 times, you start to become a little defensive, right? You start to maybe close off. You get nervous about maybe the accountability is going to a level where you're going to be exposed for not having done or checked all the boxes you need to check. I think especially with young leaders, if you can ask why not. So if they're presenting a new concept, a new program idea, a new place for us maybe to expand, a partnership, a funder, I really like to plant the seed of, well, why not? Why wouldn't we do it? And what it does is I think it inspires more hope, more the prospects for dreaming and thinking, what are the reasons that we would stop? Let's kind of invert the question and think about all the ways in which we ought to go and do this. Why not? What would be the risk? What are the downsides versus kind of this Spanish Inquisition of really making people feel like they're on their heels and they're defending their job, defending their position, or defending the concept. The way we do it, or the way I do it, is just in trying to disarm in any case where an individual is, young teamers, they may get nervous presenting to our CFO or presenting to the CEO. And so I really like to kind of humanize the situation, help them feel that they're a peer, really leverage personal power versus position power, ditch titles, get away from the title dynamics. And in fact, sometimes we'll even say, hey, this is a title agnostic meeting. You're all peers, you're all equal in this decision, and then dial away from why and start to ask why not. And that can happen even in those interactions with the front line when you're out in your organization, learning from them. You can be asking, well, why don't we do it that? Why not?
Fascinating. I loved it. We're going to give a chance now for our guests here to process what they heard from you and also dive a little deeper into the concept. So come on up here, Kevin. Kevin's going to launch you into a workshop. And Kevin, take it away.
Very good. Well, thank you, Glenn. Really appreciated your comments. I really took a lot away in your idea of how we make that human connection and then build the relationships that allows us to be good in our leadership. And I really love that last success of it, ask why not. So winning with a goodness culture, why not? And so let's dig into that a little bit and figure that out and work through that. How do we begin to embed this sense of a goodness culture within our organization where people are seeking that accountability so they can thrive and win together? So in your workbook or your handout, if you go ahead and pull out the Understanding Goodness tool, we find in working with organizations and introducing this idea of a goodness culture and how we connect that with our leadership team and those in the organization, that this exercise is really a seminal moment in thinking about what that's going to look like and feel like on a daily basis. And we talk about 4 cornerstones of goodness, that we reward excellence as good leaders. So we set that bar high, help people achieve at an even greater level. We live generously, so we're using our time, our effort, and our investment in others well. That we demonstrate fairness in how we begin to build that sense of equanimity in the organization and that sense of inclusion and belongingness. And then that sense of positivity, that we are spreading positivity in all we do, in the good times and the challenging times. And so I'm going to ask you in a moment to think about a couple of things at your table and have some table discussion around 2 things. First of all, in this exercise, I ask you to think in terms of what do each of these look like? So what are synonyms, words that mean the same, and what are antonyms, words that mean the opposite? Think in terms of what does good look like with the cornerstones, and what it might look like when it's not so good in our organization. And then a little bit into that conversation, I'm going to prompt you to the next question. I'll give you a heads up. And we're going to go to the following question to talk about at your table, and that is, which of the 4 cornerstones challenges leaders in your organization the most. So take a few minutes, work at that at your table. I'll be around to listen into that. We'll pull it back in. I'll ask Glenn a couple questions about some of what I hear, and we'll go from there. So go to it. Some working music, please. Thanks, guys. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Benny and the band. Great job to keep us moving. It's always tough when we give up that control to the audience to bring it back in. I know it's great conversation, and this is always a short time to dig deep in some meaningful things. But let's just pull it back and kind of recap a little bit what we were talking about at our tables around the idea of the cornerstones of goodness, and again, how we begin to see that playing out within leaders in our organization. I heard a couple of things as I came around. 3 things really stood out to me as I listened to the conversation at different tables. One is that what is fair for me may not seem fair to you. There was an interesting conversation around the cornerstone of goodness around demonstrating fairness. How do we define that? How do we think about that? Good challenge. Second thing I heard a lot coming around was that attitude is so important. It makes such a difference in how we think about leading with goodness. And so are we bringing that positivity to our attitude and that sense of optimism to our attitude, or are we allowing those things of the day to kind of pull us away from that attitude? And the third thing I heard a lot was this idea of limited resources really put strains and stresses on us and challenges us to lead with goodness. And so I'm sure all of us can think about some of those limited resources we may have available to us. So how do we change that thinking and leverage better the resources we have at our disposal in our organizations? A couple of things that really stood out to me as I came around, and the thing that kind of stood out to that was we need more optimism as leaders to lead with goodness. And so when I asked you to think about those cornerstones in a slightly different view on the screen, we kind of put a different picture of the cornerstones there. It was great to work through them in the quadrant format, think about the antonyms and synonyms. But on any given day, there are things, when you think about it this way, that pull us to that positive side, to that synonym side, things that mean the same to us as leading with rewarding excellence and being generous and fair and positive. And there are things that push us to that antonym side, things that don't feel like we're leading with goodness every day. And somebody asks and challenge you to think as you leave today, what will you commit to do to intentionally pull yourself to the goodness side of that? Pull yourself to the right-hand side of that picture, even when those things get tough and challenging. And so I'm going to come back to what Glenn was talking about earlier and just ask you maybe to weigh on this a little bit, Glenn, as you're thinking about the cornerstones and that idea that we heard, people are saying we need more optimism. I heard a lot of optimism in your comments. So how does optimism play into your sense of goodness and leadership, and how do you help your team maintain optimism through the good and the challenging times? You've had some challenging times.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, challenge has been kind of our middle name, and all of us, right, coming through what we've come through the last few years and what we're going to have to face over the next several. To me, optimism is not everything, but it's close. Yeah. And it is, I think, especially from leaders, you have to spend time in a hopeful posture. Because as you go in and through the organization and as burdens and challenges are felt, it's easy for folks to lose sight of the bigger purpose, the bigger picture of what we're after. So to me, optimism is a core root of senior leadership. It is part of helping people move from day job to mission or purpose. I think a lot about transformational leadership is really helping enable people moving from punching in and out in an inanimate setting to really embracing with kind of love and conviction purpose. And so to me, optimism is a really core element of that.
Great, thank you. I think that's tied also back to your second success habit, that idea of finding our decompression chamber. If we're not having optimism, it's hard to pull away and take advantage of that. So I think it ties beautifully into what you shared. Thank you for that. So, excellent. Well, we want to collect one last piece of information from you around this idea of the data that helps us build this idea of winning with a goodness culture. So if you would pick up your phone and go back to your polling, which cornerstone of goodness, when improved, will deliver the biggest impact on the culture in your organization? Go ahead, please. right, so a real quick look at that. Spreading positivity goes back to the idea of optimism, right? We view that as the area we can have the biggest impact. So as we said earlier, people leave this breakfast enthused and feeling that positive energy. Let's take that back and embed that with our team today and in the next week as we begin to spread positivity and lead with goodness.
So Kevin, that's the data behind this jacket.
Thank you.
A little bright.
There you go.
A little bright.
Well, we also know when we live the cornerstones of goodness and we build that winning culture, it allows us to think about what we refer to as breakthrough goals. Things we may not think are possible today, but when we achieve them, we'll move our organization forward in significant ways. And so if you would pull out the page, it talks about leading for a goodness culture, a chance for you to kind of debrief yourself, your own thinking around what you just did in your exercise, prepare yourself to transition back into your team, and use this going forward. Just give you just a few moments to think about who are you going to connect with in your organization to build those breakthrough goals, and how are you going to work with them to use these cornerstones of goodness to build that goodness culture. Just a few moments to think and jot some notes down for yourselves. I'll do one last piece and we'll move forward. All right, thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. So the last element that we want to introduce before we go to wrap things together and do some of the last pieces. Paul, could you move that forward one? Oh, yeah, sorry. That's good. So every time we've been together this spring, we've introduced a book bundle as part of our self-directed learning activity. For this month, our book bundle, oops, back one, there we go, is Breakthrough to Goodness. We talked about that, setting breakthrough goals. For $250, you can purchase 10 copies of the book and the electronic study guide. A great opportunity to engage your team in thinking about this winning with a goodness culture and setting the breakthrough goals that can help move you there. And I would suggest today is a prime time to pick this up as you begin to prepare your team for your mid-year operational plan check-in. A great chance for team members to come to that session thinking differently about where we're at in this 2023 and how we can end the year strong. So I encourage you to pick that up, do that study with your team, and engage them in some really challenging but positive good leadership thinking. So that's there for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Paul for a moment, and we'll go from there.
So Glenn, I warned you about this one in advance. We've been asking about 80 leaders so far. You know, we've been doing this 103 times. It was about year 4 we started asking this particular question and keeping track of the answer. So how do you know for sure that goodness pays for you in your leadership?
Yeah, tackle it in a few ways. One is we are seeing leaders growing up through the Y and going out and leading organizations like the Y, other small to mid-sized nonprofits. And to me, they're becoming convicted enough in doing goodness as a career that they're finding their way to do it in other places. And so this coaching tree of sorts of folks going out and doing goodness in other ways and in other places is some proof. I'd use an example too, and just sticking with this equity theme, we launched an equity advisory, or an equity innovation center at our downtown Y that then became virtualized in terms of content and learning. And we started to work with cities, school districts, companies on really moving them from cultural competence to cultural agility to cultural humility. And cities like Edina, who want to be more culturally engaged. Cities like Hastings, who want to be an inclusive town for their community. And so that work internally turning out is now resulting in these communities starting to be transformed at a time when we need transformation in our communities for us to come together, set political divides aside, and again, love up on each other. So I'm seeing that, the fruits of that, day in and day out. And again, Dr. Walls back there, a game changer and her team. That is proving to me that goodness pays, goodness matters. And I would encourage all of you, if you are not seeing goodness come to life in your company, find it somewhere. But as a leader, hopefully you can advance it relative to your own culture, and maybe you can spread your own goodness in other ways, whether it be in a nonprofit board context with the Y or other places.
Thank you so much. You're a wonderful man to talk with. We learned so much. Thanks for being at the Good Leadership Breakfast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. So now it's time for me to introduce Julie McDonough. Julie and I worked together for many years. She was our co-host for half of the first 100 breakfasts. And now she's here on behalf of Old National Bank. Take it away.
Thank you. Paul, true story. I almost wore my Old National Bank gold jacket today. And I'm so glad I didn't, because there's not room on the stage for two of them.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Good, thank you. Glenn, I loved your story. I always love the question about pivot points. And I loved your story about you knew it was time to make a change. You prayed for guidance. It came right in front of you and you didn't see it. And I think that was such, the part about that story about having a mentor that did and was able to help you see that was great. And I think a good lesson for all of us to think about who are our mentors, how are we continuing to develop and ask for that advice, and then how are we doing that for somebody else. So, on behalf of Old National Bank, we have $1,000 to donate to an organization of your choice.
Great.
Do you want to tell us where that's going?
Yeah, please. Oh, I've got the mic. I don't need two mics, right? One is enough. The Y has a youth and family services function. And I think many people know the Y for camp and for working out and swim gym kind of perception, but in reality, the Y is kind of a social services juggernaut. We're working with preventing human trafficking, helping women and young girls get out of a sexual predation environment, helping with homelessness, health inequities, other kinds of learning insecurity. So an amazing place, and in fact, one program called Enough does in fact help girls and women stave off a pattern of either being trafficked or in the sex trade. And so I'd like for these dollars to go to our youth and family services function. And for anybody that would want to learn more about that work, it's powerful and it's goodness in a quantum sense. So thank you.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So now, JC is going to join us with the bucket of goodwill, and it's your turn to be the giver here.
More money to give away. So if you forgot to think about a charity that you would give money to,
Think now.
there's $3,426 that one of you is about to give away. Let's raise some noise.
Fantastic, yep.
And it's all up to Glenn. So here we go. We'll invite you up on stage, and that person is...
Beth Den Herder.
Where's Beth? Hey, thank you. Come on, look at you.
Coming up, Beth.
Fantastic.
So Beth, step up to the mic, share who you are, who you work for, and then what charity you're going to give the money to today.
Perfect. I am Beth Denherder. I'm from Health Partners, and I would like to give the money to Struthers Research for Parkinson's.
All right. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Absolutely.
All right. Well, what a phenomenal morning. And Glenn, thank you again for the comments, the input, as we think about being that chief culture officer in our own organizations, how we can lead with that optimism and that connection to the human spirit. So great perspective. Going back to a reminder of the 3 success habits that Glenn shared with us, that we take our cues from the front line, think about those connections, relationships we build, not quality of one, but of multiples. Find out where to decompress when the stress gets strong, and then ask why not more often. So good reminder of some things to do today as we go forward. Well, almost every organization we work with for the first time is using what we refer to as a do-it-yourself strategy for this type of work, thinking about culture from that inside-out perspective and going it alone. And so we want to help those who are in that situation today, and if you're thinking about these ideas of culture and goodness in your leadership differently. And so we will be taking the concepts and content that we've heard from Amanda Brinkman, from Christine Geisler, now today from Glenn as well, putting that together along with the data that you've all shared through the polling and our workshop activities, and creating a bright paper around this concept. And so this summer, be looking for a bright paper Then we'll put the title up here on the screen so you can see it. Be looking for this coming out this summer as a way to advance this conversation and thinking and allow you to begin to think in terms of how you're going to create that sense of goodness culture in your organization. So with that, Paul, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, you can go.
All right, good.
We're done.
All right, I'm good. Punching out.
Yeah, punching out. Yeah, excellent. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk about culture. This is one of the most powerful slides we have. If you want it, just send me a note, paul@goodleadership.com, and we'll send it to you. So as we look forward, this is what the Bright paper is going to be about, by the way. I think I messed up on the slides here. DIY, winning with a good culture, a fresh perspective on good leadership. We're going to start writing that next week. We'll have it midsummer, and we'll send it to you. The series that we're going to do in the fall the theme is going to be good leadership as a team sport. I'm more committed to the idea that good leadership is a plural concept than any other concept other than goodness pays. This is why I think the key to thinking about how to improve effectiveness in your organization is thinking less about leadership as individual courage and insight and integrity and character. That's all important, but those are individual concepts. When we think about working together and goodness, it's a plural concept. So we're going to have 3 very dynamic people who are going to bring this concept to life. The first is Michelle Haven. She's the president of Northern Trust of the West. We've been working with her in the Los Angeles market for about 5 years. That company is on fire. She's a fantastic leader. I know you're going to be really impressed if you show up in September to see her on September 15. And then Mayanne Tran. She is a person who's been working in the philanthropic communities in this market for a long time. She's at the Minneapolis St. Paul Foundation, a bundle of energy. She's in the room today. You can say hello to her on the way out. And then Archie Black. Archie Black may be the most successful CEO in our lifespan here in the Twin Cities in terms of commercial success. Their organization they're a public company. They have hit or exceeded their sales goal 89 quarters in a row. He's a remarkable leader. He leads with a style that absolutely would be considered goodness in a really dog-eat-dog world of public company growth. And so I've been after Archie for 5 years to speak here. And the reason why he said yes is because he just announced his retirement. So there you go. Now we've become that on the stepping stone of CEOs, right? So, we're going to hear from them. And also on September 14, Thursday night, before this, we're going to have a special party for sponsors and people who want to get more deeply involved in good leadership. So we're going to send that message out, and it's actually going to be hosted across the street here in one of the newest fabulous buildings in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our friends at Old National Bank have the top of that building now. It's a swanky space. And Julie and Shaddy are going to host us, so we'll send more information about how to join us there. So my final message today is that we think summer is the best time in Minnesota to do visioning work. I mean, we all know what it means to go out to the end of the dock, whether you have one or not. We know what that is. And we always encourage our clients and the people in our firm to really take that time to think about who are you, who do you want to be, where are you going, visioning. I'm doing that work myself. I told you last month I just turned 60. I'm not as scared about it today as I was 45 days ago. And I'm thinking about what my next chapter is going to be. And there's a theme inside the client organizations that we engage with. That theme is this. We sort of live in a microwave culture now. We think we should be able to do everything just like that. Especially the private equity owners, the board members, and even individual family shareholders. And we also know that it takes a long time to really learn how to be an effective CEO. I'm trying to study what can we do to help manage that expectation gap, and what are the 2 or 3 things that CEOs who seem to have learned the job quicker than others, what is it that they learn to do? That's part of my own personal mission for the next 20 years. And so I know there are many of you in this room who are CEOs, who have been CEOs. I also want to know, will you introduce me to the CEO in your organization? We're going to write about this over time in small, medium, and large organizations, and that really makes me excited about my future. You know how to get me, paul@goodleadership.com. So the closing message here today is consistent with the last 103 Good Leadership Breakfasts. and that is that we believe the highest compliment for any leader is when someone says, you radiate goodness. So the challenge is yours. Are you ready to radiate goodness today? We can close that gap. Are you ready to radiate goodness today? Thank you very much. I declare summer officially open. Thank you. We'll see you in September.